Hajime no Ippo was a real surprise for me. I genuinely didn't expect this anime to be anywhere near as good as it was. Perhaps that's due to my limited experience with sports anime. In fact, I think the only sports anime I've ever watched was Kuroko's Basketball, which was an anime that I did really enjoy. But Hajime no Ippo is on another level compared to that. I remember when I watched Kuroko's Basketball. Every match was so energetic and got me really pumped up. Honestly, watching Kuroko's Basketball actually made me want to start playing basketball. Hajime no Ippo, on the other hand, simultaneously made me want to be a boxer and also made me glad that I never tried to be a boxer too. Kuroko's Basketball made being a basketballer this very idyllic thing, but Hajime no Ippo presents being a boxer in a more realistic manner. As the series tells us, being a boxer is dangerous and could lead to lifelong injuries or even death. A boxer's time in the ring is also very short, and no matter how good you are, there will always be either someone with more experience or a new younger boxer with heaps of talent around the corner. Ippo, our lead, as well as several of the other characters, received so many injuries and sustained so much damage in this anime that it not only raised the stakes of certain fights, but also made me go, nah, I'm alright not being a boxer. It's not just the injuries in Hajime no Ippo that are dealt with realistically, but also the techniques that Ippo and the other boxers employ. They may be animated with a little bit of exaggeration, but as far as I'm aware, all the techniques that the characters employ in this anime are actual techniques that boxers use. It gives the anime a bit more credibility and also shows the investment that the author has in not only his own series, but boxing too. However, I've gotten ahead of myself a little here. It's all well and good saying what the anime does well, but I should probably at least give you a bit of an idea as to what the story of Hajime no Ippo is about. Because whilst it's mostly about boxing, there's a little more to it too. Don't worry, I won't be going into any major spoilers in this video, but I might mention a couple of things here and there that you might class as a spoiler, but will mainly be about how the anime starts and how certain characters are introduced. So what is Hajime no Ippo about? Well, it's about Ippo, this schoolboy who's often bullied on his way home from school because he often smells like fish, as his mum is a fisherwoman and they live by the seaside. Ippo is this very meek person. He is nice and polite and the bullies tower over him. One day he's rescued from the bullies by Takamura, a boxer with the capability to go for the world title. Inspired, Ippo decides to take up boxing and joins the gym that Takamura goes to. After some trials and tribulations, Ippo is able to become a professional boxer and aims to become the featherweight champion of Japan. And that's all you really need to know for the series. There's definitely more to Hajime no Ippo's story, and as the anime progresses, certain characters become a lot more important, but overall, the story to Hajime no Ippo is quite simple, which is not a problem in my opinion. The anime is far more character driven than it is story driven. It's more about getting you invested in its characters and rooting for their victories in the ring than it is about wowing you with plot reveals and shocking twists, because there isn't really any twists in this anime story, except for one involving Ippo's love interest Kumi, but I'll talk more about her later in the video. The characters in this anime are definitely what I would describe as being the anime's greatest strength, but I do have two negatives when it comes to this anime's characters. The first one might seem like a weird complaint, but it's that sometimes the characters are just too good. And by that, I mean that this is a boxing anime, and in boxing there's always a winner and a loser. Most of Ippo's competitors were more interesting than Ippo was, and therefore I would often root for them to win instead of Ippo. This is more of an issue near the start of the anime, but generally the characterization in Ippo's opponents were better than Ippo's own characterization. That's what I mean by some of the characters being too good. I wanted them to win instead of the main character. The primary reason for this is that Ippo's opponents usually have better motives for getting into boxing, and or the match against Ippo usually meant more to his opponent, whereas for Ippo it was just a stepping stone towards a larger goal. To really hammer home the point I'm trying to make, here's how some of the fights would go in Hajime no Ippo. You would have Ippo and his backstory of, oh, I got into boxing because I think it's really cool. I love boxing. And then you'll have his opponent who has a backstory like this. When I was younger, I always dreamed of being a boxer. In fact, my father was a boxer before me. However, we started noticing that he was getting worse and worse at boxing. We took him to hospital and discovered that he had boxing cancer. Basically, his boxing gloves had cancer, like Captain America's shield did in that one comic. He was forced to retire, and he turned to a life of drinking and drug abuse. My mother abandoned us for a better, younger boxer. And my dad eventually succumbed to his boxing cancer. He got me a final gift before he died though. A cute little puppy. One day I took that puppy out for a walk, and it ran into the road. It was hit by a truck carrying nothing but boxing gloves. I became depressed until I met my current wife. Unfortunately, at one of my boxing matches, she slipped and hit her head on the side of the ring. She's currently in hospital. The prize money from this match will be enough to pay for her treatment. Boxing has taken everything from me, but I plan to take something back. And then Ippo wins by just knocking them out. That was a very comically exaggerated backstory for a boxer in this anime, but honestly, it's not that far from the truth. and there would genuinely be times in this anime where I wish we were following a different character's journey to Ippo. This criticism of mine does get addressed though eventually, as the anime starts to showcase fights that don't involve Ippo, and those interesting characters that I wanted the anime to follow do start to return in the anime. But certain opponents from the start of the anime don't return, and I kinda wish they did, as some of them had some really compelling stories that I wanted to see continued. For example, one of Ippo's first opponents is a boxer who has no power behind his fists, but has a true love for boxing. He is often booed during his matches, as he always makes sure to win on points, and therefore his matches are always boring to watch. However, he dreams of getting a KO, and I would have loved to have seen his character one day achieve that, and receive recognition from the boxing audience. But instead, after his match with Ippo, he never returns to the story, which just felt like a wasted opportunity. This is something that happens with a lot of Ippo's opponents in the early stages of the story. The other issues I have with the characters is that some of the boxers are so one-dimensionally evil, like legitimately evil. Not just a douchebag or a sleazeball, but actually, truly evil. Whilst these characters do make you root for their downfall, they're also quite boring in my opinion. It wouldn't be an issue if this was a character trait used sparingly, but by the time I got to Sawamura, I was already tired of it. But bar these two issues, one of which is arguably more weakness in the anime's main character than the other characters, Hajime no Ippo has a fantastic and diverse array of characters for you to get invested in. Despite my character complaints, I do think Ippo is a good protagonist. He has undeniable talent but also works very hard at what he does, and whilst I may not always root for him when he's in the ring, I definitely rooted for him when he was outside of it. I really wanted for him and Kumi to get together, and when it seemed like there was a chance that he would have to give up his boxing career, I desperately wanted him to keep it. He's a good character, and whilst I may occasionally want him to lose, he deserves every victory that comes his way. Takamura will most likely be most people's favourite character in this anime, mainly because he's funny. He does stupid things and acts like a jerk to pretty much everyone, which might not sound like the most inviting of character traits, but it actually makes him feel like an older brother to the rest of the characters, especially as they all admit to looking up to him since he is genuinely a phenomenal boxer, and whilst he may not take most things seriously, he treats boxing with the utmost respect. The anime also makes a smart decision to occasionally switch focus from Ippo to Takamura as the anime progresses. Watching Takamura's journey towards world domination has been thrilling and also hilarious when everyone realises that they're rooting for a lecherous imbecile. Honestly, Takamura kind of reminds me of Homer Simpson.
Now we'll begin by... Oops. Did you see that jerk? He dropped his notes.
A lovable moron. There's also the dynamic duo at the gym, Aoki and Kimura. Aoki is arguably the worst boxer. He's mainly used for comedic effect, something that is even used in his own boxing matches unlike the other characters. He could sometimes come across like a laughingstock and someone that no one takes seriously, mainly due to his fighting style, but Aoki is a really good character, and when the spotlight is put on him, I couldn't help but root for him as he's by far the biggest underdog in this story. Plus, I absolutely adore his relationship with Tomiko. I enjoy how inseparable the two become after they meet, and I like that even though he may never become a champion in the ring, he was still able to do something that many people can't. Find love. However, I think I prefer Kimura as a character. He's still just as silly as Aoki outside the ring, but his fights are usually treated a little more seriously. In fact, my favourite fight in the entire anime was when Kimura fought Mashiba. I have never rooted for a character more in any of these fights like I did for Kimura against Mashiba. Seeing him push himself to his limits just so that he could take on one of the scariest characters in the anime was exhilarating. He was a true underdog that was worthy of taking the crown. It's certainly the high point of the series for me. Kimura is a great character with a fantastic voice actor. Unfortunately, Keiji Fujiwara passed away a few years ago, but his performance as Kimura was magnificent, and it would be exceptionally hard to find an actor that can give Kimura the same presence that Keiji did. The last main member of the gym is Genji Kamigawa, who acts as the main trainer for both Takamura and Ippo. Genji is a very important character, and the anime really develops both his relationship with Takamura and Ippo. Takamura wants to win the world title, but not just for himself but also for Genji, and Genji admits that despite Takamura's personality, he views him like a son. However, Takamura was born with ability, whereas Ippo needs to be shaped by Genji. Ippo's achievements carry more weight to Genji because he feels like Ippo succeeds because of him, whereas Takamura was always going to be a great boxer. Genji is undoubtedly a father figure to both Takamura and Ippo, as well as the rest of the gym. He was brought to life by two fantastic voice actors, Kenji Utsumi and Shozo Izuka. Sadly, both have passed away. Kenji Utsumi did a wonderful job with the role from Hajime no Ippo to Hajime no Ippo New Challenger, and Shozo Izuka did such a good job with the role in Hajime no Ippo Rising as I didn't even notice that the role had been recast, and I binge-watched this anime. Both voice actors leave behind heavy shoes for whoever has to step into the role going forward. There's also Itagaki, but at least in the anime he hasn't really had an opportunity to shine, and as of right now just feels like an extra wheel on a car that doesn't need it. That could change in the future, but for me personally his character isn't that good. And that's the great group of characters that occupy the gym that Ippo goes to. However, like I said earlier, you'll root for some of Ippo's opponents because they're great characters too. I'm not going to go through every opponent that Ippo faces, but there are a few that I really want to discuss. Firstly, there's Miyata. Now Miyata is a strange character for me. At first, he was my favourite character in the anime, and I couldn't stop myself from rooting for him. I couldn't wait for the inevitable confrontation between him and Ippo, as I was preparing myself to root for Miyata. Unfortunately, after a certain point in the anime, his character gets pushed to the sidelines. Yeah, every now and then the spotlight does get thrust back on him, but he appears so infrequently that I kinda lost interest in his character. He's initially presented as Ippo's rival, but as the series progresses, it feels like he's lost that title to other characters, which is a shame because he's not a bad character, just an underutilised one. Speaking of rivals, there's Sendo. Whereas Miyata should have been Ippo's rival, Sendo is the one who actually feels like Ippo's rival to me. I would genuinely be more excited to watch the third fight between Ippo and Sendo than the first proper fight between Miyata and Ippo. Ippo and Sendo are so similar in terms of boxing ability, yet in terms of characterisation they are completely different. Ippo is quiet and reserved, Sendo is loud and boisterous, itching for a good match in the ring, and he's not all talk, he actually has the skills to back himself up. His second fight against Ippo may be the best fight involving Ippo in the entire series for me. He's a really fun character and I'm glad that he stuck around in the anime. Plus, I found out that he has the same voice actor as Shinji in BLEACH, so I like him even more now. However, there is no character that I like in this anime more than Volg. Volg is not only my favourite character in the anime, but also one of my favourite characters in all of anime. Volg is this boxer from Russia who moved to Japan to rise the ranks and become the world champion. To him, beating the Japanese champion Date, who we'll discuss in a second, is something that will improve his natural boxing ability and catapult him to the world title. However, there are two reasons why I like Volg so much. One, he's surprisingly nice. When Volg was first introduced, I expected him to be a douche. There was just this air to him, an air that completely vanished the first time he spoke with Ippo. He's just a really pleasant guy. The second reason, and the more important one, is that his story is really tragic. There was only one moment in this anime where my emotions nearly got the best of me, and it was a scene involving Volg. I won't spoil anything about it other than it involves an airport. I said earlier that sometimes I'd root for characters other than Ippo because they would have compelling motivations and backstory. Volg is the pinnacle of that. There is no character in this anime that I wanted to see succeed more than Volg. Sadly though, Volg was not the greatest fighter that Ippo ever faced, although he was certainly one of them. No, that title goes to Date. Date is a legend in the anime, literally. Takamura may be this extremely strong boxer, but Date feels like an actual champion deserving of respect. Once again, he's another of Ippo's opponents with a more compelling backstory. And the fight between him and Ippo felt like it was significantly more important to Date than it was to Ippo. Like Sendo, Volg and even Miyata, I think he's a really good character and I'm glad that the series decided to keep him around. The final opponent I'm going to talk about before I move on to other aspects of the anime is Mashiba. Mashiba is the first villain in this anime. Most of Ippo's opponents are just that, opponents, but Mashiba was the first to actually feel like a bad guy that Ippo was defeating. If you remember what I said earlier in the video, I don't like the characters in this anime that feel one-dimensionally evil. However, Mashiba gets a pass for two reasons. For starters, he's the character in the anime that starts this trend, so it felt unique when he did it first, and the other reason is that Mashiba does receive development over the course of the series. He may start out like a one-dimensional bad guy, but with time, the anime gives him more and more layers, and we get to understand why Mashiba is the way that he is. That still didn't stop me from rooting against him in all of his fights, but he's far from the one-dimensional villain that he was initially presented as. The final character I'm going to mention is Kumi. She's Ippo's love interest in the show. I'm not going to discuss her too much. I liked her character and their relationship felt like it developed very naturally. My only issue with her character is her voice. Kumi gets recast twice, and I'm not really sure why. As far as I can tell, all three of her voice actors are still alive, so I have no idea why she was recast. But I'm here to tell you that the recast was really noticeable. Both times. It's a shame because I really liked the first voice the most and it really suited the character, so whenever she showed up in the series after the recast, it was really jarring and she didn't feel like the same character to me. But other than the recast, I really liked her character and her budding relationship with Ippo. Now that I'm done talking about the characters, let's move on to everything else that the series does right. Well, first of all, there's the soundtrack to this anime. I loved the first two openings for this anime. They would do a magnificent job of getting you hyped for the upcoming episode, which is exactly what you want in a boxing anime. They'll get you excited just like the ring entrance songs that play as a boxer steps out in front of the audience. However, the final 3 openings were not my cup of tea. But hey, that's me, and I'll be honest, I always skip the endings so I won't speak of their quality. But the rest of the soundtrack that plays during the anime was pretty good in my opinion, especially during the fights. They would always enhance your emotions, especially whenever the soundtrack linked with whatever was happening with Ippo. The most impressive aspect of the anime to me is how well the animations held up after all these years. I know I shouldn't be too surprised by an anime made by Madhouse having good animation, but I couldn't help myself. This is an anime that I think first released in the year 2000, and it does look like it, but there is fluidity to the characters' movements, and the anime is actually animated. The punches in this anime are given the weight they need as you watch sweat launch off the back of the boxers' bodies. Every single one of the characters' ultimate moves are prioritised in the animation department, making them feel more lethal. Madhouse and later Mappa did an excellent job with the animation in this anime. Obviously, don't expect cutting-edge animation. Even Hajime no Ippo Rising doesn't have the greatest animation in the world, but Hajime no Ippo does have good animation in my opinion, which impressed me due to the age of the anime. In fact, the quality of the animation is one of the reasons why I'm so nervous about the apparently confirmed 4th season. Yes, that's right, Hajime no Ippo is apparently coming back for a 4th round. I googled it and Google says yes, so if it turns out that Hajime no Ippo Season 4, The Power of the Elephant Trunk doesn't come out, then it's Google's fault. But yes, it does seem that Hajime no Ippo is returning. There was a new game that released recently, and they even went as far as to get new voice actors for Kimura, Kamigawa and Nekata, whose voice actor, Nagai Ichiro, also passed away. So that also makes it seem like Hajime no Ippo will return. My main concern is that Hajime no Ippo will be passed off to a studio that decides to just use completely CGI. I really hope that Season 4 gets animated by either Madhouse or Mappa, or if not them, then Studio M2. If you don't know who Studio M2 are, they're the studio that's animating the really impressive looking Pluto anime. The reason I say them is not just because of the high quality animation that Pluto looks like it's going to boast, but also because of Masao Maruyama. Masao Maruyama, for those who don't know, is the co-founder of Madhouse, as well as the founder for both Mappa and Studio M2. Currently, he's the chairman of Mappa and the president of Studio M2. But the reason I bring him up is because he is reportedly someone responsible for constantly getting the Hajime no Ippo anime made. He was apparently the guy pushing for more seasons of the anime. I don't know if that's 100% true, but if what I read is correct, then I'd be happy with Hajime no Ippo being animated at Studio M2 if Mappa and Madhouse turned it down. Honestly, I'd just be happy as long as Hajime no Ippo Season 4 gets a good adaptation, because this is an anime that deserves a high quality adaptation. But before I wrap things up, there's one final negative that I feel I need to mention. This is the weakest of the negatives, but it ultimately depends on your tolerance level. Hajime no Ippo is an old anime, and certain things haven't aged the best. By that I mean some things feel a little outdated and could rub you the wrong way. They didn't really bother me, except for how some of the characters referred to Mari Imura, the reporter for Monthly Boxing Fan. Some of the characters describe her as arrogant and other things, but I never got that impression from her character. She just seemed like someone doing her job and taking it seriously, but maybe it was a mistranslation in the subtitles, and I didn't get the full picture. But some of the other stuff that might bother you is that there are some gay jokes in the anime. The characters do not respond the best to the idea that Ippo may be gay, and the other is that Ippo ends up going against a black boxer at one point, and the characters talk about the boxer as if him being black has given him some form of superpower. Fortunately, the boxer is one of those characters that I mentioned earlier where I rooted for them instead of Ippo, but there are some things in this anime that could completely turn you off from it. But for me, they didn't bother me too much and I really enjoyed this anime, because Hajime no Ippo is really good, surprisingly so. I say that because it feels like Hajime no Ippo has become a hidden gem as no one really seems to talk about it nowadays. Which is a crying shame because this anime should have as many eyes as possible on it because it is legitimately good. Hajime no Ippo may not have the most creative of stories, but that's not an issue due to its remarkably diverse array of characters, consistently great animation, wonderful voice acting, and some tracks that will definitely stick in your memory. All of these excellent qualities, combined with its lack of discourse and hype in the anime community, result in Hajime no Ippo, surprisingly, being a hidden gem.